Hello, esteemed audience. I am Field Marshal Rommel, and it is my honor to guide you through the captivating tale that unfolds within these pages. Uncover the untold tales of bravery and sacrifice in Vanguard Valor, Chronicles of Courage, a captivating three-part series that transports you to the heart of World War II. Led by the indomitable Rittmeister Strack, follow the harrowing journey of his advance party as they defy the odds and shape the course of history amidst the chaos of battle. As they traverse the unforgiving landscapes of Ukraine in the scorching summer of 1941, their mission was clear: to keep the enemy off balance, secure crucial bridges, and provide vital reconnaissance for our advancing forces. Join me as we embark on a journey fraught with danger and heroism, from the Bug to the Dnieper, through the Uman steppe, and beyond, to the shores of the Black Sea. From icy winters to rugged mountain valleys, their unwavering courage and determination shaped the course of history. Yet, as the tides of fate shifted with the tragedy of Stalingrad, they faced their greatest challenge yet. Together, we will witness their valiant struggle, their ultimate sacrifice, and their enduring legacy. So, gather round as we unveil the epic saga of Rittmeister Strack and his gallant comrades, a story that echoes through the ages with the spirit of valor and resilience. You are about to embark on a journey through the first of three parts, aptly titled Dust and Destiny. This marks the beginning of an intriguing tale that will unfold now.
A folding table is set up in front of the earth-gray thatched cottage. On it is a map showing a section of western Ukraine. Dust hangs in the sun-drenched, shimmering air, covering everything with a layer almost as thick as a finger: the dry grass, the map, the thatched roof, and the sparse acacia tree that towers next to the drawwell. The dust blows in clouds from the runway on which the division has been marching for 2 days. 2 days ago, on June 15th, the regiment had broke through Stalin's line after a tough battle. Since then, the enemy has retreated. The path to persecution is clear. Major Schrimpf, the first general staff officer of the division, finishes a conversation he has just had with Colonel Radke, the chief of staff of the Army Corps, in the cottage whose inhabitants have fled. He turns the crank and puts the receiver back on the field telephone. In the small, low-ceilinged room, where the only decoration is an old Russian icon depicting an unknown saint in a darkened gold frame, the summer heat hangs like an oven. Rain would certainly be a blessing for the country, but you can't wish for rain. It would quickly turn the tarmac into soft soap, as has already happened after brief showers, and have a decisive impact on the division's marching speed. Despite the heat, Major Schrimpf buttons up his field blouse. The wide crimson stripes of the general staff officer shine on his leather-trimmed breeches. As he walks to the card table outside the hut, Schrimpf glances at his wristwatch. 12 sharp. Rittmeister Strack must arrive at any moment. The major brushes the dust off the map with a wave of his hand. He bends over the sheet. In the east, it still includes the Ukrainian bow, where the enemy will probably put up resistance again. Schrimpf straightens up, turns to the east, in the direction of the advance. A sea of golden yellow sunflowers on tall green stalks begins at the edge of the poor little village, seemingly waving into infinity. The major involuntarily changes his line of vision. Over onto the runway, a battery of heavy horse-drawn artillery is moving through the village. Shouting and cracking whips, the horses fall into line. The wheels of the heavy field howitzers sink deep into the pulverized earth. An engine roars. A dust-covered bucket truck roars out from behind the village grain silo, turns off the runway and approaches at high speed. Even before the brakes bring the vehicle to a halt, a youthful officer with a suntanned, gaunt face jumps off, and with a characteristic movement, pushes his dented field cap into his forehead. Rittmeister Strack. He takes 2 steps to the card table and raises his right hand to his cap in greeting. His serious-looking eyes are pale blue, the brows above them almost bleached white by the sun. Major Schrimpf extends his hand to the cavalry captain across the table. Strack's left hand is clad in a leather glove and hangs down stiffly. It is his second hand, as Strack likes to say. His own was shot off in Poland in 1939. The division's reconnaissance section, commanded by Rittmeister Strack after the fatal wounding of Major von Kessel east of Lemberg, had already swapped its horses for bicycles, motorcycles, and armored reconnaissance vehicles before the French campaign. Only the orange-yellow weapon color of the cavalry has remained traditional. Strack wears it on his cap, shoulder boards, and collar patches. Like Major Schrimpf, he also holds the EKI and the Silver Wounded Badge. Nice of you to come on time, Mr. Strack, says the TA of the division. To the point. I can give you a mixed detachment that is probably unique in the division, a company of our motorized tank destroyer division. Further, a battery of 10-centimeter long barrels, 1 battery 15-centimeter howitzers, all motorized of course, plus 2 assault guns and a smoke launcher battery. Nebelwerfer, never heard of it. What's that, Major? Asks Strack, resting his artificial hand on the map. Nebelwerfer, explains Schrimpf, are new weapons used in this campaign. The projectiles are filled with an explosive charge, sometimes also with flame oil, and are fired from simple stationary wooden racks similar to large fireworks rockets. There are also other versions, mobile on wheels and with several tubes, but we have the ones with the racks. Are you satisfied, Mr. Strack? Absolutely, Major, Strack replies without exuberance. And my combat mission? Pursue the enemy up to the bow and, if possible, form a bridgehead. It occurs to me that you will also be joined by a motorized engineer company. Strack nods approvingly. Good, I'll be able to use these. All right, says Schrimpf with a cautious smile. Then everything is clear. You'll start tomorrow morning. By then, everything will be assembled in front of you. You'll be in contact with us by radio, of course. You'll be largely on your own, especially if you manage to switch to overtaking pursuit. In this case, you will have to hold the target until the infantry follows. In general, I estimate that the front will be 3 or 4 days' march behind you. So don't count on quick help if you run into something. But you'll have to admit that this advance party is a force that can do quite a bit. Yes, Major, says Strack, who has carefully studied the behavior of the Red Army since June 22, 1941, the deadline for Operation Barbarossa, and has come to the conclusion that it would be a serious mistake to underestimate this enemy. As a trained reconnaissance man, he has a good eye for the moves of the opposing side. He is not too comfortable with the thought to the order he has just been given. But orders are orders, and Rittmeister Strack has never been faint-hearted. But he was cautious, despite his reputation as a daredevil, which he certainly didn't earn by showing off. And now, Mr. Strack, says Major Schrimpf, interrupting the other man's thoughts, the general wishes to see you before you leave. He accompanies the cavalry captain to a staff tent set up behind bushes, in front of which 2 guards with steel helmets are posted. Major Schrimpf disappears into the tent, reappears in the entrance, and waves Strack over. The cavalry captain tucks his cap under his left arm and enters the tent. The division commander, General Mack, is an old gentleman with a stocky figure, a broad flushed face, and gray-silver hair. Strack, he said, holding out his heavy, gripping hand to the cavalry captain, you know what depends on you. You must catch up with the enemy, stay on his heels, and prevent him from building up a new front. Expect him and his rearguard to fight to the last to stop us. Leave everything unscathed that does not directly affect you. That will be a matter for the following infantry. Do your job well, Strack. The advance party I'm entrusting to you is the division's trump card at this hour. Play it so that we don't get stuck at the gateway to this huge country. If we have to race against the Stalin line again, the Army's long-term objectives, which are to be achieved before the onset of the Russian winter, will disappear into the unattainable. Keep that constantly in mind, Strack. We understand each other, don't we? Yes, General. General Mack shakes his hand in farewell. The cavalry captain is dismissed. Strack goes back to his car. Otto, he says to his driver, a lance corporal with a sharp, smart mouse face. Turn it up. We're taking off. I thought they were inviting us to lunch, Mr. Rittmeister, Otto Falterman replies as he starts the engine. Shabby, eh? The cavalry captain laughs. How do I finally manage to teach you to respect your superiors? Falterman? The corporal grins. If the war lasts another 10 years, maybe you'll succeed. The trouble is, I always have to imagine people in their swimming trunks, including our pay pug by the way. Nothing against the staff paymaster, says Strack. I was just thinking about him earlier. We'll pay him a visit. Maybe he'll make an advance on the next allotment of sutlery. That wouldn't be bad, would it, Otto? We're leaving tomorrow morning. I thought so, replies Falterman. They don't appoint you to the divisional command post for nothing. You should have become an yaw rider, says Strack with a laugh. You had the brains for it. Maybe the brains, says Falterman, but not the meat. I always say, the faster we advance, the sooner we'll be back home. The lance corporal falls silent at these words. Now, without meaning to, he has touched a sore spot with the boss. He, who usually drives with great feeling, lets the car shoot forward. Strack suspects what his driver is thinking about now. He thinks about it too. He can only rarely forget it, and then only for a short time until it comes over him. Again, like a burning pain. 3 months ago, in April, when the reconnaissance unit was fighting in Serbia, he received the incomprehensible news. His wife and 8-year-old boy had been killed in the first enemy air raid on his hometown in the Rhineland. Lena and Fritchen had been buried under the rubble of his house. 4 weeks earlier, he had been on vacation. A bomb had wiped everything out. In the squadron he was leading at the time, a wave of compassion had flooded over him. Major von Kessel, the commander who had been killed near Lemberg, had offered him special leave. He turned it down. What else did he want at home? There was no longer a home for him. That is what the Lance Corporal Falterman, as Strack well knows, has just thought. It's all right, Otto, he says. Don't worry about it. Time heals all wounds. Falterman steers the bucket truck onto the tarmac, whereafter the passage of the heavy battery is not underway. That's what you say, grumbles the corporal, when I imagine that I could go mad. Falterman, says Strack, and he doesn't know where he gets the words from. This war still has a lot in store for us all. We'll have to accept it and keep our wits about us, and try to get through it in one piece. He lights a cigarette, gives it to the driver, and then takes one for himself. Shouldn't I roll down the windshield, asks Falterman, to change the subject. When the sun falls on it and Ratas, Russian fighters of the type I-16 Rata equals rat. The aircraft was given this designation during the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939. A disc like this is a real eye-catcher. They usually miss, but when they come, buzzing in like that, it always makes my head spin. They're not coming today, Strack remarks dryly. Our hunters were already out. Early in the morning. They're faster and have more firepower. When me 109s are in the vicinity, the Ratas keep a low profile. Rittmeister Strack does not mention the fact that his own air force only rarely went into action, and not to the same extent as in France. The Lanzer will find out soon enough that this campaign, which had begun on June 22, 1941 after the most contradictory slogans, will not go as smoothly as the lightning campaigns in Poland, the West, and the Balkans. In any case, he is convinced that the Russians are an opponent who cannot be overrun in the first onslaught. You drive between endless fields of sunflowers. The village where the division headquarters is located has been left behind in the shimmering expanse. The division had already passed through many such villages since it had entered the actual territory of the Soviet Union near Podwolozista on the Zbruks. Not all of them were deserted. Often women with brown, of white headscarves, framed faces and barefoot children greeted the German soldiers, like friends, handing them bouquets of field flowers or small gifts. Every time Strack had seen the brown hands one trusting to him laughing at him, Ukrainian woman, wrestling with the feeling that he had to warn the good people. From a commander's meeting at the general knows that the liberation originally promised to the Ukrainians is an outright deception, that the fighting troops are followed by organs whose task it is to establish a strict occupation regiment and to enforce abdications, which the tense food situation in Germany. But how had the general expressed himself at the meeting? We must not look backwards, gentlemen. We have our advanced goals. May God prevent us from becoming the henchmen of a great injustice. That had been several days ago, before the attack on the fortified and stubborn Stalin line. The serious words of the division commander are indelibly etched in Strack's memory, and he is aware that even earlier in the former Soviet-occupied East Prussia, after Tarnopol had fallen behind the division, General Mack had condemned with unusual severity terrible incidents in this town, which was mainly populated by Jews and for which the SD security service bore responsibility. All this contributes to the fact that Rittmeister Strack looks forward with a feeling of trepidation to what is to come, to the advance into the unknown, which is to begin tomorrow morning. They overtook long columns of marching troops, infantry with red, sweaty faces, artillery whirling up dust in columns of vehicles, an army of all branches of the armed forces. At an abandoned and half-destroyed Caucase, they had turned off actual route of advance and headed southeast. Wheat fields have replaced the sunflower plantations. Somewhere in the distance there is the faint sound of fighting, again and again, in areas through which even the trusses have long since passed. Fighting breaks out between scattered Red Army detachments and German security units, which follow the fighting troops at a distance. Tolkinovka becomes visible behind a bump in the road. The air trembles above the few houses and the onion-shaped church dome of the small village, as if it were a mirage in the waterless, sun-drenched steppe. The Soviets had used the church as a grain store, but after the invasion of the German soldiers, the people of Tolkinovka, almost all of whom had remained in the village, returned the church to its original purpose. Even a pope who had been in hiding for a long time suddenly appeared. The motorized troopers of the reconnaissance division have taken up residence in Tolkinovka. Staff Paymaster Herlane, whom Strack wants to visit, also lives in the village. Herlane is an autocrat. He is reluctant to be interfered with in his official duties, which include the supply of food and fuel, but you have to give him credit for the fact that he has never let the division down and has often brought forward what was needed under the heaviest artillery fire. As Strack drives up to Herlane's quarters, the weighty staff paymaster rolls out of a hammock stretched between two fruit trees, which is as much a part of his luggage as an infantryman's sleeping blanket and canvas tent. Strack gets out and walks towards the fat man. "Have I disturbed your siesta?" he asks. Herlane admits it bluntly. "What's new?" he then asks, unhurriedly buttoning his light summer blouse, which Strack secretly envies. "There seems to be something in the air," he continues as the cavalryman does not answer immediately. Trucks have been ordered from the fuel depot and the divisional rations depot to receive 6 days' rations. "We're going to be the advance department," says Strack. "I thought so," says the staff paymaster laconically. "They haven't put us on hold recently for nothing." "All right then, pre-division. And when does the curtain go up, Mr. Rittmeister?" "Tomorrow morning. You'll find out all the details. But something else now." "What about something to drink?" "Always for you," says Herlane in a cordial tone. "I know that," confirms Strack, "but I'm thinking first and foremost about the department." Herlane thinks about it. "I suppose it can be done," he says, "in view of the coming events. I'll send what I have to the squadrons with the rations. Agreed, Herr Rittmeister?" Strack thanks him and goes to his car. Before Falterman drives off, however, the staff paymaster appears and hands Strack a wrapped bottle. "For you, Mr. Rittmeister," he says. "Break a leg. I'll make sure you don't run out of gas." Strack drives off to the departmental command post. This time it's going to be a long night if everything is to be ready to go by tomorrow morning. Outlined in gray, the land expands in the first pale glow of dawn. The stars fade hesitantly in the high sky. Rittmeister Strack is standing in front of his tent, which Otto Falter has just. Man is dismantled. Strack had barely slept an hour. He had been called to the telephone again and again, and by midnight, the leaders of TH units under his command had contacted him one after the other. Little Lieutenant Sieber comes out of the nearby thatched cottage which houses the division command post and reports, his hand on his peaked field. Cap. Staff reconnaissance section ready to depart. Telephone lines have been dismantled. Coffee will be served in 10 minutes. Strack nods absent-mindedly. Thank you, Sieber. He glances at his watch again. An hour ago, still in a deep haze, Lieutenant. Demel, head of the bicycle squadron, had set off with his first platoon to reconnoiter. He should already be back, as he was only supposed to determine whether the next village, about 2 kilometers away, was enemy-free. Falterman stows the tent and the baggage of the cavalry captain and the adjutant in the bucket wagon, which he had driven under cover between the maize plants. On the only wide street in the village of Mikhailovka, which houses the department staff and the staff squadron since yesterday accommodated, the vehicle column, which will form the head of the advance party, is waiting for its marching orders. 2 all-terrain vehicles with twin machine guns, which have proved to be extremely effective in low-flying attacks. In low-flying attacks, 2 armored reconnaissance vehicles, 2 armored personnel carriers of the staff squadron and the motorcycles of a platoon of the Kratzhutsen squadron. The 2 assault guns, which are already approaching, will form the front and rear of the column. The reconnaissance guns, the 2 motorized batteries, tank destroyers, Navalwerfer and sappers follow. The engineers will be followed by the combat vehicles and the 2 Sankas, ambulances, with the medical personnel. The previous evening, Strack had finalized everything with his adjutant. The corresponding orders had then been drawn up and handed to the respective unit leaders. "Where is Demel?" mumbles the cavalry captain. It is already brightening visibly. The yellow and green of the sunflowers and the golden brown of ripening wheat emerge from the colorless twilight gray. Thickly leafy treetops rise out of a hollow. They are reflected in a pond in which Strack and his aide had also taken a refreshing dip the previous evening. The road leading out of the village to the east, a strip of dust-fine, crushed steppe, earth over which the retreating Russian columns had passed the day before. Yesterday, disappears behind a bump. Strack keeps looking there. If only Demel would finally show up. He can't have encountered any enemy. Only far to the southeast could the faint sound of battle be heard some time ago. Lieutenant Demel is not one of those who let themselves be rumbled over without a fight. Strack anxiously takes a packet of cigarettes from the pocket of his field blouse, takes one out, lost in thought, and slips the packet back into his pocket. The adjutant, who is a non-smoker, looks for matches. Strack waves his hand and takes out his lighter. The man is his own man, Sieber, even if he only has one hand left. Once again, the cavalry captain lets his gaze glide along the road where he will soon be marching forward with his advance party. Here they come, Lieutenant. Demel is coming with the scouting party. They pedal laboriously. The wheels sink deep into the dust. The scout leader and his men have camouflaged not only their steel helmets but also the handlebars of their bicycles with fresh green. Demel turns his head briefly as he approaches. Dismount and step away. He swings off his bike and pushes it to Strack, who is standing at the side of the road. Lieutenant Demel, back from reconnaissance, took a little longer than expected. My most obedient apologies. Pauloka is enemy-free, Herr Rittmeister. I also had a look around the immediate vicinity. The Russian does, indeed, seem to have left. Strack hands the first lieutenant his right hand. Thank you, Demel. I thought you wouldn't leave it at Pavlovka. Make sure your men get another sip of coffee before we start. While Demel gets back on his bike to follow his men, Strack turns to Lieutenant Sieber. What do you say we have a bite to eat, too? Who knows what the day will bring? I can't imagine that the Russian has disappeared without a trace. And if he really has, he'll give us all the more trouble later. Falterman comes from the field kitchen with a cooking pot full of steaming coffee. In his other hand, he has 3 filled field pots. Breakfast, gentlemen, he says, savoring the aroma wafting up from the cookware. Staff Paymaster Herlane had once again outdone himself and actually handed out coffee beans from his not inconsiderable black stocks. Dust billows up in clouds, veiling the glistening light of the morning sun. The Strack advance party has been rolling for 2 hours. The assault gun plods ponderously around with rotating tracks, followed at a short distance and therefore, to Otto Falterman's undisguised displeasure by the cavalry captain's bucket, in which Lieutenant Sieber also has his place. Always in front, grumbles the driver, next to whom Strack is sitting. The silver wounded badge is probably not enough for you. You absolutely have to have the gold one. In a bad mood, Otto? Asks Strack. Look, only someone who's in front and can see what's going on with their own eyes can lead. Strack knows that with every kilometer they cover, they move further away from the division. Even if no shot had been fired so far, the country itself, there is something hostile about this giant country that has never been conquered and defeated in its entirety, as if even the earth, the black, fertile soil of Ukraine, wanted to defend itself against the advance of the foreign soldiers in their field gray uniforms. A big lug may not sense this sinister feeling that seems to lurk amidst the blooming sunflowers and behind every bump in the road, but not everyone who carries a gun is a tough guy, and not everyone is convinced that it is right to wage war on Soviet Russia. Strack picks up the map board and looks at the area marked out for him as an attack strip, as if the map were capable of showing them to unravel the secrets that the area holds beyond the Ukrainian bow. To his left, Hungarians are advancing, a mixed, fast unit of the Hanviter army. At least that's what the yacht told him during the last conversation. On the right, a German infantry division follows in echelon, as the saying goes, but it is still quite far behind and does not yet allow any connection. Major Schrimpf had once again urged him on the phone to familiarize himself with the idea of being completely on his own, with open flanks, no rear connections, a wedge into the unknown, which could only be helped after 3 or 4 days. Strack had once again sent the tried and tested First Lieutenant Dimmel ahead, with his bicycle platoon as a feeler. The idea that the enemy, who had been fighting desperately on Stalin's line just 3 days ago, had vanished into thin air seemed absurd to him. He will turn himself in somewhere. The GIA had pointed out to him that it was to be expected that enemy rearguards would resist to the point of self-sacrifice in order to cover the retreat of their divisions to a new line of defense. Strack looks up from the map. The sun has risen higher. The sky is almost cloudless, as it usually is since the beginning of the advance in the east. Behind the assault gun, with Lieutenant Moore and 2 crewmen sitting on its armored superstructure, the dust billows up in thick clouds. A cyclist, sweat beading on his reddened face under his steel helmet, struggles past the assault gun through the deep dust, hands the cavalry captain a sheet from Dimmel's report pad, turns his bike around and rides back the way he came. Strack reads the report. Observed Red Army infantrymen from the grove east of Birisoka, about 3 km away. Dust plumes of marching Kolani to the west-northwest. Dimmel, 1st Lieutenant and squadron leader. West-northwest, thinks Strack. That could be the Hungarians, but so could parts of the Red Army. He hands the registration form to Lieutenant Sieber, who is sitting in the back seat of the car. Looks like it's about to start soon, he says, leaning out of the bucket to wave. One of the motorcyclists following the command vehicle. Unit leader to the eastern edge of Birisoka, he shouts to the dispatcher who rattles off at full throttle. Strack says to Lance Corporal Falterman, "Take it up a notch, Otto. We're going ahead." Always this hot temper, grumbles Falterman, but obediently steps on the gas pedal and steers the car past the assault gun. Strack signals to Lieutenant Moore to follow him by waving his hand. They drive through a hollow. When the car has passed the flat uphill section, they see the mushroom clouds of smoke from the shells in front of the houses of Birisoka, which are already visible. While Falterman drives on undeterred, Strack again waves one of the crane detectors to him, who are hanging from the bucket like burrs. Artillery forward, he shouts to the man whose face has become unrecognizable under a layer of dust in the driver's goggles. The thunder of the detonations, which were repeated at short intervals, became louder and more threatening the closer they came. The Russian obviously intended to disrupt attack preparations in or near Berisoka with the shelling. Falterman brakes suddenly when it hits nearby, immediately starts up again, and speeds into the village at top speed. "Damn," says Strack as he gets out. "That was close again, wasn't it, Otto?" "You wouldn't have it any other way, Herr Rittmeister," the corporal replies, ungraciously. "Stop complaining at last," Lieutenant Sieber reprimands him. Strack laughs. "As long as the lance corporals are grumbling, there's still a good chance of victory, eh, Otto?" "Yes, Mr. Rittmeister," replies Falterman, visibly disgruntled by the young bung Sieber's insult. But Lieutenant Sieber, who had been a little nervous against his will in the last few minutes, hands the lance corporal one of the cigarettes as always carries with him as a non-smoker for foundation purposes, and Falterman is reconciled. He brings the car to the cover of one of the abandoned thatched. The first shells hit the village. Strack waits impatiently for the unit leaders to arrive. Every minute is precious. Experience shows that once the enemy has dug in, he holds on with tenacity. And when it comes to digging cover in positions are the Red Army soldiers, as already have shown themselves to be unsurpassable masters. Finally, two bicycles appear in the village, one close behind the other. They are the leaders of the 2nd and 3rd Squadrons, First Lieutenant von Langefeld, the multiple award-winning tournament rider, and Lieutenant Fromm, a reservist who had served in the Reichswehr with the cavalry in Breslau and had taken his leave, due to disagreements with a party bigwig. Strack, who was an orderly officer under Kleist in Breslau, knew Fromm from back then. He greets them both with a handshake. "There's work to be done, gentlemen," he is about to say, but a vicious howl in the air tears the sentence from his lips and causes him to take cover behind a croft in a flash. The two squadron leaders followed him just in time. When the impact is thundered and the gunpowder smoke dissipates, they see that a funnel of a considerable diameter is yawning where they had just been standing. Strack taps his leather-clad hand with his healthy right hand. "3 knocks on wood," he says. "I think they mean us directly." The shelling on the western edge of the village intensifies visibly. Nevertheless, the bucket trucks of the 2 battery commanders and the cars of the tank destroyer and engineer commanders arrive one after the other unscathed. Only the chief of the Navalwerfer is still missing, but Strack cannot wait any longer. He retreats with the officers, who have also been joined by his adjutant, into the blind spot of an embankment that rises to the right of the elongated street village. The 2 battery commanders, Captain Stein and Captain Kranzberger, are older officers with a wealth of experience from the World War I. Stein is long and lean, while Kranzberger is a stocky, rotund Bavarian who can't deny his native dialect with every word he speaks. Rittmeister Strack draws up his plan of attack. His main concern is to engage the enemy guns quickly and effectively, for only a fool could expect to succeed in smuggling the entire advance party through the ever-closing barrage without any casualties. "Then," says Captain Kranzberger, the head of the cannon battery, "I'll drive right up, pick a suitable spot and gee to my guns ready." "I would suggest bringing the howitzers forward first, Mr. Kranzberger," Strack contradicts. "My scout troop leader, who is sitting over there on the hill in the little wood, has observed plumes of dust behind us on the left. Could be Russians, couldn't they? And flat-fire guns are made for direct fire." The 2 captains agree, and the long stone goes to his car to look for an observation post with Lieutenant Demmel. At the same moment, Lieutenant Moore rumbles into the village with the assault rifle. The lieutenant jumps off, runs off, throws himself down, hurries on, and arrives at Rittmeister Strack out of breath. "The captain of the smoke throwers," he says with difficulty. "His car got hit. Direct hit, barely 30 meters in front of me." He breathes more calmly and asks for permission to launch an attack against the enemy battery. Strack shakes his head. "Out of the question. Think about it. They'll hit you in the face and you'll be finished. Captain Stein can do it with his howitzers." While he is still speaking, he hears the sound of an approaching airplane. A Raider, he thinks, but it is a Henschel, close-in reconnaissance plane that begins to circle over the village. Before it takes off, it drops a signaling can. Green smoke billows up between the houses where a can has hit the ground. Immediately afterwards, the cavalry captain has the scout's report in his hand. 7 enemy tanks approaching from the northeast. He reads and hands the message to Captain Krainsberger. He passes them on to the tank destroyer Lieutenant Randolph. "The main thing," interjects Rittmeister Strack, "is that we are not delayed too long." The squadrons of the reconnaissance detachment advance in 3 attack wedges through a field of almost man-high standing rye. Shells ring out over them towards the enemy. The enemy guns, which had been firing at Birisoka for half an hour, are soon silenced. Captain Stein now endeavors to hold down the enemy infantry in their positions. The Russian tanks that had spotted the reconnaissance aircraft have not yet appeared. In the grove on the hill on the eastern edge of Birisoka, the two...
Greetings, I am Owen Rommel, the renowned field marshal from the Second World War. I have paused this program to introduce you to something of great significance. In these challenging times, as we stand guard in distant lands, the safety of our homes and the well-being of our families have never been more crucial. In my day, we could only dream of having a way to watch over our loved ones from afar. But today, a remarkable piece of technology exists that can do just that. Introducing a light bulb camera, engineered with precision and disguised as a regular light bulb. Despite its small size, it packs a powerful punch in terms of features and functionality. The camera offers a 360 degrees night vision full HD experience, capturing every detail in stunning clarity, both during the day and in the dark. Here are some of the key features of this amazing product. Motion detection and alarm function. The camera is equipped with advanced motion detection capabilities. Should it detect any unusual movement or hear an unfamiliar voice, it swiftly sends an alarm directly to your phone, keeping you informed and in control. Built-in speaker and microphone. This feature allows for two-way communication, making it perfect for keeping an eye on children, monitoring elderly relatives, or even watching over pets. 24/7 monitoring and recording via phone. With this camera, you're always connected to your home. It provides round-the-clock monitoring and recording that you can access directly from your phone, no matter where you are. For indoor and outdoor use, designed to withstand various weather conditions, this camera can be used both indoors and outdoors, providing comprehensive security for your home. Easy setup. Installing this camera is as simple as replacing a regular light bulb. No complex wiring or professional installation is required. In my time, such peace of mind was a luxury we could scarcely imagine. But now, you have the power to protect what's most important to you with technology that was once the stuff of dreams. This light bulb camera is more than just a tool, it's a steadfast sentinel, a guardian of your peace. In a world filled with uncertainties, it offers the reassurance that your home and loved ones are safe and sound. Secure this camera for your home today by clicking the links in the video description, and let's create a safer environment for our loved ones while fostering a community dedicated to protection and care. Now let's resume to the main program.
Assault guns. Captain Krainsberger's cannons and the tank destroyers stand ready. Rittmeister Strack and his adjutant have driven up to an elevated point from which there is an unobstructed view on all sides. The Kradmelder are with him to pass on any new orders to the unit leaders should the situation change. Strack stands behind a bush, the glass in front of his eyes. Suddenly he sees something like a giant beetle crawling slowly out of a hollow. Strack involuntarily looks towards the wood. Has anyone there recognized the tank yet? Immediately afterwards there is a flash between the trees, and almost at the same time a mushroom cloud grows close to the enemy tank. The Soviet combat vehicle looks like a toy, the flames of the firing flashes, now twitching from its barrel. Firing at short intervals, it picks up speed again. The fountains of earth and smoke from the shells hitting all around it don't seem to phase it. Strack observes how the actions of the squadrons are changing. A second one appears behind the tank, followed by the others reported by the reconnaissance aircraft. Confusion arises in the ranks of the attacking wedges advancing through the tall grain, which intensifies as the rattling bursts of fire from enemy machine guns begin. Strack can no longer stand his observation post. He runs off. His destination is the grove where the cannon battery and the pack anti-tank guns are located. The Kubelwagen with the adjutanten and the signalmen follow him. With an ugly screech, a tank shell passes so close over him that he ducks. Involuntarily, he stops, turns around and waves excitedly. Falterman understands and steers the car towards the nearby road, which is not visible. Even the tank gunners seek cover from the wildly firing tanks. Strack reaches the grove, at the edge of which are the 4 long-barreled guns, and 2 5-centimeter pocks, behind whose shields the pan fighters wait for the order to fire. Captain Stein, the head of the howitzer battery, stands hunched over with his scissors telescope. As the cavalry captain approaches, the long captain says, "I'm fighting the machine gun nests now." Then he turns to his radio operators, who are crouching at the device, and gives the number of a range correction for transmission to the firing battery. Meanwhile, the 4 cannons roar in succession. The cartridges are ejected and new shells are immediately pushed into the tubes. Strack goes to Captain Kreinsberger, who urges his gunners to fire even faster. When the captain sees the cavalry captain, he steps towards him. "Pity about the ammunition," says Strack reluctantly. "How many rounds have you already fired, Mr. Kreinsberger?" "It'll be fine," says the captain calmly. "A cannon is not a carbine." At this moment, the first gun lets out a wild roar. "He's on fire! He's on fire!" "Look," says Kreinsberger, "we've got the first tank." The 2 officers walk to the edge of the forest. Sheaves of flame shoot out of one of the enemy tanks, and black smoke billows out in lazy clouds. "It's done," says Kreinsberger. No sooner has he spoken than the second tank is lifted up as if by a giant fist and shatters to the thunderous roar of several explosions. When the third tank comes to a halt with a damaged track and the crew gets out, the 4 remaining tanks turn around and make a hasty escape. At the same time, the enemy machine guns also stop firing. Strack watches through the glass as several dozen Red Army soldiers disappear under a bump. Grenades detonate among the throng of fleeing people. Captain Stein says to his radio operators, "Order to the battery, get ready to change positions." Strack sends the dispatchers to the squadrons, while the advance party regroups on the road for a new advance. Lieutenant Demmel sets off with his bicycle platoon for further reconnaissance to the east. Relieved, Rittmeister Strack goes to his car, which has once again fallen into line behind Lieutenant Moore's assault gun. A glance at his watch shows him that the battle has barely lasted an hour. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Lieutenant Demmel reached the bow, following a railroad track to the east. Not a shot was fallen. Once again it seems as if the enemy has dissolved into nothing. The railroad bridge that spans the river, which follows the Black Sea, is blown up in the middle section. First Lieutenant Demmel, who is watching the bank on the other side in the willow bushes, waves Wachtmeister Sawitsky, the platoon leader, over. Sawitsky, a slender man below average height, immediately understands what the first lieutenant expects of him. "It's a small matter for me to run over there," he says. "I'm just asking for cover in case Ivan makes himself known. I'm supposed to find out if the air over there is clean." Demmel nods. "Guess, Sawitsky, if the east bank is enemy-free, maybe you can smuggle something across today and form a bridgehead over there. It's certainly not difficult for the pioneers to replace the blown-up part of the bridge with to replace the emergency footbridge." Before Constable Sawitsky begins his climb across the steel girders hanging in the River begins, are in the bank bushes 2 mg. In position. Brought. Besides the 2 light machine guns are 40. Carbines pointed at the other bank. Soetsky hangs the submachine gun on his back to be unhindered, stubs out his cigarette and goes it alone. With admirable confidence, he balances, arms outstretched, over the bridge arch, reaches the blast site and gymnastics with monkeys. He walks with agility over the twisted tangle of beams until he has regained his footing. He reaches the other bank undisturbed, disappears into the dense bushes, reappears a little later and waves to indicate that he has discovered nothing. Suspicious. Strange, thinks Lieutenant Demel. To his mind, it is a gross omission that the Russian seems to be content with this, to have interrupted the river crossing by the inadequate blasting. The constable takes the breakneck route for the second time. He says to his squadron leader, "East Bank enemy free." First Lieutenant Demel reflects and remembers the principle of never giving up what has already been achieved without need. Never give up what has already been achieved without need. Platoon. To be left on the shore as security and to make their own way to the commander as quickly as possible so that the extremely favorable situation can be exploited before nightfall. At first Demel has to push his bike as he has to walk in the pathless terrain. Better progress. In places when the overgrowth of the floodplain becomes too dense, he carries the bike, and as so often, he asks himself, why OHK actually the riding abolished has. In Russia, the horse would be the given means of transportation. Bicycles, on the other hand, are more than a hindrance in this country where there are hardly any paved roads. If it really rains, he thinks, we can just leave the bikes behind and switch to walking. The bikers aren't much better off either, especially as the fine dust clogs the air filters and causes frequent breakdowns. Demel has reached the railroad track, which has swerved in a wide arc to the north. It's not far to the road. The bike on his shoulder, he taps from sleeper to sleeper. To the right, a vast cornfield stretches out, its stalks move weakly in the sultry summer wind. Less than an hour ago, Demel had passed by with his train, and he had been surprised that everything had remained quiet. The sheaf of bullets from the first burst of machine gun fire whizzes over him. Screeching, he drops the bike, grabs the submachine gun, and throws himself into cover on the embankment of the low railroad embankment. The only thing missing is that they're sitting on this side too, he thinks, while a wild spell of fire starts from the cornfield. Demel crawls and jumps crouched along the embankment. He will get the bike later, if there is a later date for him. A culvert formed by a half-dried ditch forces him to leave the protective embankment. He hastily wades through the trench in the hail of bullets. Something sears hotly across his back, but he has already reached the continuation of the railroad embankment and throws himself down, breathing heavily. It runs down his back, warm and sticky. It's just as well his spine isn't scratched, he thinks, and crawls and jumps on until the shooting stops without a trace. When Demel arrives after what seems like an endless time on the road that stretches deserted to the west, he begins to run as if someone is chasing him. His knees threaten to buckle, but he forces his weakness down. At last he sees the assault gun up ahead, leans against a tree that gives him a foothold, and awaits the approach of the column. The assault gun stops by him. Then Rittmeister Strack rushes up, and Lieutenant Demel, leaning against the tree, makes his report in a failing voice. His main concern is that his first platoon is now sitting cut off on the banks of the Bug. The first lieutenant's face is gray under his tan and wet with sweat. He haltingly describes the location of the cornfield in which the enemy must have secretly taken up residence after moving in with his men. Strack sends the dispatcher after the department doctor, together with his adjutant and Lieutenant Moore from the assault gun. He beds Demel, who has suddenly lost his strength, in the grass at the side of the road. They lay the wounded man on his side, his field blouse soaked with blood on his back, and Strack holds his head, from which he has removed the steel helmet. Finally, the Sanka arrives, the gray car with the white, red crosses painted on the ground. Assistant Dr. Schmidt jumps off. 2 paramedics follow with a stretcher. The ward physician kneels down next to the wounded man, who is not. Knows what is going on around him. He's lost a lot of blood, says Schmidt, as he, supported by Sieber and Moore, begins to remove the first lieutenant's field blouse and take off the equally bloody shirt. The graze is not deep and does not look dangerous at first glance. Schmidt gives Demo the obligatory tetanus shot and applies a bandage. The medical orderlies lay the wounded man on his stomach on the stretcher and take him to the ambulance. I'll have him driven to the main dressing station, HVP, says the assistant doctor to Strack. Surely the route will be clear. What do you think, Mr. Rittmeister? Strack shrugs his shoulders. In human terms, yes, doctor. But let's not forget that this war is very different from anything we've experienced since Poland. That's the problem for us in the first place. We have to be prepared for heavy fighting and a corresponding influx of wounded. But how are we going to get them to the HV site when there are 30-40 kilometers or more between us and the division? That will only be possible with armed protection, Mr. Rittmeister, says Schmidt. Of course, but I can already see that I will soon be dependent on every man. The Sanka leaves. Strack consults with Sieber and Moore. Demo's report was alarming in that the bicycle train, which is stuck on the banks of the Bug, is in great danger of being caught in the back by the enemy. I'll attack with the assault guns, suggests Lieutenant Moore. Strack hesitates. Assault guns without accompanying infantry are, despite their firepower, is unsuitable for eliminating enemy machine gun and gunner nests. A single courageous man who knows how to handle hand grenades can disable an assault gun, which, unlike a tank, does not have a swivel turret. There's no time to lose, Mr. Rittmeister, urges Moore. Strack asserts his concerns. The assault artillerymen must agree with the cavalry captain. And what do you say we mount a number of your people, he adds. We have to risk it, says Strack after a moment's thought. Deployment, artillery preparation and all that are out of the question. Now it's time to get to work. Right, Moore. Bring out your second gun. I'll give you a platoon of my Kratzhützen Schwadron. You take the lead. Your mission, break through the enemy positions on the railroad track and advance to the bow. Communication will be maintained by radio. You know the frequency. As soon as you start, my device will go into reception. Strack looks after the assault guns, which roll away from the road through the terrain with the clanking of their barrels and the roar of their engines. On each of the 2 armored colossi, a cluster of countrymen, steel helmets on, carbines in hand, the belt full of hand grenades. The rest of the Kratzhützen platoon, more than 30 men, follow on foot at some distance as a security curtain. Soon the small attack group disappears behind bushes and trees. The rattling of the caterpillars and the spitting, roaring noises of the engines become fainter. Like any troop leader who has to make a quick decision, Strack wonders whether he has acted correctly. Soon, after a few minutes, it will become clear. He knows neither the strength of the enemy nor the nature of his positions, but isn't the essence of his task risk-taking and hasty improvisation. You can't read in any tactics textbook how an advance party in the heels of the Red Army should behave. The Russian does not follow any pattern either. Sometimes he evades the advancing Germans as if by fence, sometimes he takes up the fight. But this unpredictable game of cat and mouse, in which you never quite know who is the cat and who is the mouse, does not seem to be based on a lack of planning. Outwardly, the cavalry captain, whose leather hand hangs down rigidly and lifelessly, is a picture of imperturbable composure. None of the officers who have gathered around him notice his inner turmoil. 2. The first day, thinks Strack. Near Birisoka, the chief of the fog throwers has been torn to pieces along with everyone in the wagon with him, and up ahead, where the battle will soon begin, good Demel has been hit. He was the only officer in the cyclist squadron. For the time being, Sawitsky, the oldest and most capable sergeant, will have to take over leadership of the squadron until Demel's replacement arrives. Suddenly Strack is electrified. Individual shots are fired, hand grenades crack. A Russian machine gun begins to buzz. Then the assault guns fire with an unmistakable roar. "It's going well," says Lieutenant Sieber, the adjutant. The noise of battle increases to a confused roar. No one can tell from this whether the attack is penetrating or whether the Soviets are holding their ground. It almost seems as if the battle is moving away, but isn't this assumption just a wish? In any case, the assault guns are still in action, or could it not be the enemy's pox? Soon the noise of the battle does indeed become weaker, ebbs away, and finally falls completely silent, like a whirlwind that has roared devastatingly over region. What might it look like? Had his own attack been beaten off, or had more, and his small group been shot up? Or had they got through? The radio operator from the department staff is crouching by his device. Strack always gives him impatient, questioning looks, but the corporal shakes his head until he suddenly nods excitedly and, with a message pad on his knee, begins to write hastily. The adjutant hands Rittmeister Strack the torn-off piece of paper. Strack reads it. Standing at the bow, Sawitsky has held position, have smashed enemy force, group and battalion strength. 2 Poks shot down. Own losses, 1 dead, 5 wounded. Enemy losses not visible. 145 prisoners so far. End. More. Lieutenant. Strack lights a cigarette and turns to the officers who are watching him intently. "Come on, gentlemen. The journey continues. Lieutenant Moore is at the bow." The battlefield by the railroad track offers the men who use the site combing for scattered Red Army soldiers, a sight of gray. The grain has been rolled down by the assault guns. Fallen soldiers are left behind in the trail of the steel colossi. Dead bodies lie in dozens of narrow, man-deep cover holes. A Mongolian rifle battalion has perished in an area of a few hundred square meters. The statements of the prisoners reveal unanimously that the battalion order had the German battle group to let them pass, and later cut them off in the rear. One of the Red Army soldiers who lost his nerve when the German officer appeared on the railroad track on his bicycle had prematurely destroyed the masterfully camouflaged position. He had opened fire without orders, and the others had followed his example to shoot down the German, so that the SEM did not succeed in bringing up reinforcements. The plan did not work out. Lieutenant Demel escaped, albeit wounded, and the Soviet battalion was destroyed. The number of prisoners crouching on the ground, guarded by 3 soldiers, is constantly increasing. More are tracked down in the undergrowth of a nearby forest, in irrigation ditches, even among the dead in the cover holes. They trot too. The others, with their hands up, settle down next to them and wait for the end, with expressionless faces. Their officers, none of WHOM survived the battle, are said to have told them that the Germans would shoot all the prisoners. Once the area has been searched over a wide radius, the prisoners are led to the road and taken over by a small escort of Kradschutzen. The guards have orders to take the prisoners, whose number has risen to more than 200, to the division, and then immediately return to the advance party. Meanwhile, the armored reconnaissance vehicles of the heavy squadron under the command of First Lieutenant von Langefeld drove out to reconnoiter. Before nightfall, Langefeld is able to report to the commander, who is slowly following with the bulk of the detachment, which has also been joined by the assault guns and Wachtmeister Sawitsky with his platoon, that his squadron has an undamaged road bridge firmly in its hands. That evening, the advance party crossed the Bow and dug in on the East Bank Inn. the bridgehead held by the heavy squadron. The Strack advance unit continues its advance to the east. It is a war against invisible ghosts, which from time to time, and usually when you don't expect it, turn into fanatical fighters. Then, as they advance south of the old Cossack town of Uman, the resistance suddenly intensifies. Rittmeister Strack has the impression that the time for pursuit is over, that the enemy is preparing for battle, and that it is advisable to make short work of it until the infantry, which is lagging 4 days' march behind, has caught up. Strack communicates his thoughts to the division staff by radio. To his astonishment, he is ordered to stay on the ground at all costs until the Sinjucha River, take up position there and wait for further orders. Once again, the department has set itself up in a hilly, wooded area. Terrain for the night. To the left ahead, in a hollow hidden behind trees, lies a small village, as reported by a scouting party sent out that evening to reconnoiter, which, as is so often the case, is not marked on the map. The scouting party has entered the village, which appears to have been abandoned by its inhabitants. The scouts returned without encountering any resistance. The Strack advance party has now been on the move for the second week. The losses incurred since the crossing of the Bug without a fight amounted to 4 dead and 16 wounded. These figures prove that Strack was always careful not to sacrifice a single man through recklessness, and that he knew better than most how to adapt to the enemy's tactics despite their unpredictability. Careful reconnaissance precedes each of his moves, so that he has never yet fallen into an ambush, even though the enemy has repeatedly set threatening traps for him. On this night, however, which envelops the wide, gently undulating land in peaceful silence, Strack has the unsettling feeling that he has missed something. Again and again he leaves the tent that Otto Falterman has set up for him, and Sieber walks to the pack positions and the machine gun emplacements set up around the group of vehicles gathered in a field, as if he had to convince himself of the people's vigilance. But it is his restlessness that drives him around. Finally, after midnight, he wakes his adjutant and orders him to send a scouting party south. Sieber disappears between the vehicles, which are surrounded by shimmering green fireflies. When the lieutenant returns, he reports that Constable Soetsky, who is still in charge of the bicycle wagon, has set off with 6 men on a nighttime reconnaissance. Rittmeister Strack squats in front of the tent and lights a cigarette. Lieutenant Moore comes over from the assault guns and asks the commander if there is anything special. Strack looks up. "Not yet, my dear, but you never know." Lieutenant Moore sniffs and says, "Mr. Rittmeister, I think it smells like thick air." Strack looks up. "Don't paint the devil on the wall, Moore. We're really sitting on a platter here. The disadvantage of this kind of thing is that you have to move too close together. A single battery could smash a group like this in no time, not to mention." "But indeed," admits Lieutenant Moore thoughtfully, "the good thing is that Iwan doesn't fly at night any more than ours do. The only thing would be a fire attack by artillery. But no guns have been firing for 2 days. Do you have any clues? Points?"
Hello once more, this is Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. I trust you found today's episode of Epic German World War II Stories engaging, and I am excited for you to join us for the next one. Please don't forget to show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section, what you enjoyed about today's tale and any suggestions for improvement. If you're interested in taking your support a step further, consider checking out the link in the description for our recommended spy camera, a great tool to enhance your family's safety. Wishing you and your loved ones continued health and wellness. Yours sincerely, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel.